I'm Summer Meese with Colorado Springs Utilities. I'm the Chief Operations Officer. Thank you all for coming out tonight to talk about the Drake demolition. Appreciate that. A couple safety items before we get started. If we need to leave in case of an emergency, exits are on each side. I kind of feel like a flight attendant right now. And restrooms are in the back, so I just really defined the whole flight attendant thing. I also want to give a special thanks to Tom Strand. He's an outgoing council member. And thank you, Tom, for all of your efforts in helping with this project and your service. And I believe Councilwoman Michelle Talarico was supposed to be here, but I don't see her. But if so, we'll also introduce her. So tonight, the goal of this meeting is to inform all of the residents of the Mill Street neighborhood and anyone else interested in what the Drake demolition process is going to look like, schedule, and just give you as much information as we can on what this is going to look like going forward. We'd like to ask you to hold your questions to the very end, and we'll answer those questions when we get there. And we've got Doug with Independent Demolition here to give the details about the demolition project and the process, since this is really his forte. I was going to use a bad joke for my friend Steve Berry about what's the name of a guy who digs, Doug. Steve, it worked. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Doug, where he can talk about what the project looks like, the timeline, some topics around noise mitigation, dust mitigation, traffic security, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, Doug Thomas with Independence Excavating, Independence Demolition. Just give you kind of an overview of what we do and how we're going to work on the site. As far as our team goes, obviously Colorado Springs Utilities, thanks for having me here. We will have Burns McDonald as an overseeing engineer. And then of course us and our crews as well. We are the demolition contractor. Just a little bit, because there was a couple questions of who are we. We are based out of Cleveland, Ohio. We do have an office in Denver, and we perform work all over the country. So kind of, actually the picture is the founders of the company a couple of years ago, and then the map of the United States with our offices and all the different states that we actually do work in. One of the projects that we do an awful lot of is power plant demolition. So this slide shows you all the different power plants that we have done across the country. And you can see kind of the vast array. We do travel across the country for this work as well as other industrial demolition projects. Just to highlight a couple other projects that we've done, and what we wanted to do here was kind of show a before and after picture, where you've got the power plant, the outbuildings and the other facilities, and this was after the main power plant was gone, and we were final grading the site. So we do come in, and not only the power plant, but all the outbuildings and everything, and we'll get into it, but that's a similar scope here. Another one we did was in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This one was on the water as well. We took down the stack cooling towers, power plant boilers, and left the site level. One of the advantages, and we'll point this out later on, is that for this project, where downtown Philadelphia we leave it stone or pavement, we are putting topsoil over this site and seeding it when we're done. So a little bit on the timeline. We are starting. June this year we'll start. We're actually getting in and starting to get some of the preparation work going. There is some asbestos abatement that's going to happen this summer. Demolition will happen from this summer through next summer, and final seeding and site restoration will happen next fall. So by the end of 2024, we're out. This shows a little bit of the phasing of kind of moving through the project, and if you think about it, we're starting in the phase 1A, 1B, 1C with the cooling towers, then moving to the blue. The stacks will come down at that time as well, and then moving into the boiler houses, and then finally some of the administrative outbuildings on the far end. We will do the rail car unloader, which is up top. And this is a previous aerial photograph. The new beakers are already installed there. So we don't have any work in this area. It's actually all paved over now. Work hours and work days. We are planning for daytime hours. We'll do some maintenance at night, but the demolition work itself will be in daytime hours. We're not doing any work on Sunday. Quite frankly, our guys need the rest. And like I said, equipment maintenance will be performed, which is refueling equipment, greasing equipment. Communications and notice. Couple events, the stacks actually come down slowly. You'll see that with the crane, and we bring the concrete down slowly in pieces. But the boilers will come down in larger events, and we'll work with Colorado Springs Utilities and put out a community notice, just so you know kind of when that's happening, so you're not surprised. And then the other thing that you probably will hear from a noise standpoint is hammering of concrete. It's kind of it's just that, it's a hydraulic hammer. Everything will be less than 85 decibels, which is basically the site of normal talking at the perimeter of the site. So, equipment, we're bringing all our own equipment. We'll probably rent a few pieces, but at least the major equipment is all ours, it's all owned. It's new and well maintained. Does have mufflers, does have Tier 4 emissions compliance, and mostly hydraulic hammers, as opposed to pneumatic. So, not a whole lot of pneumatic equipment. Dust mitigation, because this will be a question. Our main mitigator for dust is water. We do that through a series of sprayers, which you see on one side. There's a curtain that we will use actually on the other side, closer to the creek in the new peakers. But mostly it's fire hoses. This is called a dust boss. It's basically a snow machine that you don't run snow through. You run water through it, and it knocks down dust. And then a water truck. Keep a water truck on site that runs around and does that. So. We also will have a street sweeper. Most of the controls will keep everything there, but we will have a street sweeper as needed. Security and traffic. The site will be maintained full-time. There is a portion where we take the wall down along the street. We will replace that with temporary fence, immediately keep the site secure. It will be secure during demolition. And then once we leave, we put a permanent fence back where that wall was. So the site will remain fenced. Truck routes, I'm going to talk about in a minute, but the truck routes will go right to I-25. And I got a nice drawing of that. But to answer the big question, no truck traffic will go through Mill Street. I'll show you that on this slide. What we have from the site, our truck either going out this gate or this gate goes straight up Sierra Madre Street and right out to I-25. We have a few large pieces of equipment that can't get in here. They come off I-25 to Las Vegas Street and they go right in this south gate. So this won't be touched by our truck traffic. And we will go through this with all our truck drivers on orientation. They will be well aware of this. We will use both gates. We'll have signage up, and we will keep track of all of our drivers. As far as the demolition, I got a couple of slides of kind of typically what we do. The slide on the left, I mean, this is how we're going to bring down the stack. It's a crane with a concrete muncher on the end, and it basically brings down the stack in pieces. It's not a fast process. It will take probably a month and a half, 2 months for all 3 stacks, but that's how we're doing it. Then the other slide is, and this was a plant that we did in Arizona. This is a little larger than the one we're dealing with. But a lot of hydraulic equipment, hydraulic excavators, and bringing down the plant that way. The site conditions, site grading. One of the things we're doing is all the concrete that's on site, we will crush and reuse that as backfill. And then over top of our work area, again, the peakers are constructed brand new in the coal field, and but all our area will get 4 inches of topsoil and seed when we're done. So, remaining infrastructure, summer.
You can try.
There you go.
Thanks, Doug. And also, real quick, I did see Councilwoman Talarico sneak in, so thank you for joining us tonight. Site condition and remaining infrastructure. I'm actually going to go back. I'll highlight these and then go back to slides that might help a little bit. Natural gas generators. These are those natural gas generators that can be relocated at a different time. Those are currently in place and in operation right now. So we're starting those up, and those will be producing power full force middle to end of May. And we've got the south substation, which is the transformer on the far right-hand side there, and I'll go back and show where that's at from a different view. And then the fiber hut, and I think Mr. Brian Warninger had come out to a previous meeting for the Mill Street residents to talk about this fiber hut that will be there. It's going to help provide more internet access on our fiber system in that area, so also a positive benefit. I'll go back to this to show that a little better. You can see these stacks here, that's those natural gas generators, much smaller than the existing stacks. They are where the coal pile used to sit. And then you've got the substation here, and that will be long-term infrastructure that will be there for the unforeseeable future. We need those to make sure we can move power from the north end of town to the south end of town, kind of like the heart that's pumping blood out. So that's really the focus of that substation. To be able to do that, without that substation, we wouldn't be able to get power to the different areas of the city. So that is critical infrastructure to utilities. There is a plan in the future to move those natural gas generators once we have some more supporting structure in the 2027-2028 timeframe with transmission. So those are not intended to be there long term, but that is down the road, and we'll work through that as we get closer to that. So that's a little bit about the remaining infrastructure, but other than that, everything else will be to the ground. With that, that's really what we have for you all, so we'll open it up for questions, and I will try to answer whatever I can. We've got a great project management team that's running this, so they'll be able to help answer anything. We've got the public affairs group in the back to be able to help with other things. That's the thing during this, we want to make sure that we're always available for communication and any questions as this process goes on. You know, it's not ideal, this happening in your backyard. So there's an email address on the fact sheet and phone number to reach out to our public affairs group to be able to help answer questions as we're going through this process going forward. So, questions? Yes, sir. Can you bring the microphone just so you...
You can't hear me.
Mic might not be on.
No.
You're close enough.
Okay, yeah, thank you. As you point out in this brochure, the plant is more than 100 years old, and it's been used for generating power in different ways. It was originally a coal gasification plant before it became a generating plant. So I'm wondering what's been done on the site to analyze it for environmental contamination, and what's going to be done to remove that contamination.
The question was about the history of the site and environmental analysis and future remediation. Is that kind of a good summary? Okay. So up until this point, there's been minimal environmental studies other than what's inside the plant from a lead and asbestos for the abatement of the facility itself, to make sure we're taking care of that. The site itself, once everything's down, we will go through an environmental process to do that determination, determine what we will have to do to remediate this site long term, and that may mean dig it all up and replace it, might mean monitoring wells, so that's really a big question mark right now, what we'll have to do to meet the CDPHE, Colorado Department of Health and Environment regulations and EPA regulations. You're welcome.
My question is, where do you get your gas from?
The question was where do we get our gas from? Natural gas. Right now, our natural gas is supplied from Kinder Morgan. It comes out of Cheyenne, Wyoming. Yep, we have a pipeline that comes out of Cheyenne. And then several storage locations in the northeastern Colorado area that feed that pipeline. It's good gas, right? I'm from that area of the state originally, so yes, that is good gas. Any other questions?
We do have one that we like working
You
at.
have it? Okay, let me grab this one and then you got that one.
You mentioned dust mitigation. Is there, and then, a recognition of the environmental contaminants that might be in the soil. Is there a process for figuring out how to mitigate things like, heavy metals or things that might be in coal getting into the air that's beyond what's done for the dust, or is that the exact same process?
I mean, our approach is to mitigate all of the dust. Heavy metals, we knock down all of the dust. Now, our dust is all within the building, so we don't get into the ground contamination and that end, but the water sprayers and all of the mitigations that we do, and we monitor it on a daily basis. We keep a log and everything. That's all for the dust in general.
And then long-term soil, we'll go back to that environmental question of what we have to analyze and mitigate, remediate. Yes, ma'am.
Carolyn Pulaski, Black and Latino Leadership Coalition, and I have just a question about, since you're using water, it's going into the ground, how are you mitigating that from contaminating the groundwater for this neighborhood, for these people around in this area? And are you working with public health at all during this process? I haven't heard anything about public health being mentioned.
I mean, public health we go through with CDPHE for all the permitting process. As far as the water, as the project goes, where that's collected in the storm sewers, which is retained on the basin, on site, and handled that way. Basically, just like storm water. No, it's less than storm water.
I think you need to explain that to me one more time so that I can understand exactly what you're talking about.
Okay. The water that we use is out of hydrants, and then the water, as it knocks down the dust, it goes into the detention basin.
How?
Through storm sewers, catch basins on site.
So they already exist?
They're already there, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's basically where all the rainwater is going right now.
Okay. What? No, I'm good. No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
And I would assume there's a stormwater management plan and environmental regulations associated with that, with stormwater being captured on site, not leaving site, not moving dirt from one location to another, to manage all of that environmental internal with the storm sewer and retention ponds we already have there. Okay, thank you. One in the back and then one here. And I'm going to try to not blank myself.
So when you catch the stormwater, where does it go then? Does it flow to the creek, or do you run it down to Las Vegas to the Reese water plant, or what?
Is that still part of our IPT permit that will go to the Las Vegas water treatment plant, Brian?
Yes, the waters on the site will be collected. They will go to the stormwater basins and they will be monitored before discharged to the Las Vegas facility.
You mentioned the asbestos briefly. Now, times that I've seen buildings torn down with asbestos, they were encapsulated, like a tent around them. I can understand that this might be a little large to do that with, but still, the neighbors right across the street and stuff, if you're tearing down asbestos.
And I think that's just a question, so I'm gonna let Doug answer what would be an asbestos-containing material in their plan to remediate that before anything's torn down.
And there's a couple different methods, but encapsulating portions of the plant, we do like basically mini containments. Or there's other ways we can do it where if it's a smaller area, like a piece of pipe, we can plastic and enclose it that way and then remove it that way. But yeah, everything is very regulated, and so there are requirements for the containments, for wrapping and for containing anything as we abate it. That's why we abate it, so that those things can get out under containment rather than through demolition.
Those activities will happen before we actually start tearing any structures down. So it'll all be pre-abated before anything's torn down to mitigate any kind of exposure to the atmosphere.
Because the asbestos that I've seen in the past wasn't just in little places, it was the whole, large areas at a time that I know of.
And in the large areas, you have to put up large containments. And we're doing some follow-up testing right now to identify those areas and make sure I have a picture.
If you use this as this structure had asbestos, how would you?
There would be a poly structure, scaffolding and plastic target that is contained. It has air filters and blowers on it, and it has sealed openings where when the guys go in, they're in the white suits and the masks. They go through a dual lock system to go in, and they go through a shower system to get out. So it's all contained that way.
I know we do our first animals today.
Yeah. And actually, that is a good point. We do air monitoring and we do clearance monitoring too. So once we say it's done, there's confirmation testing too.
Hi, Jen Cecil from the 20 block of Fountain and the Mill Street Neighborhood Association. I wanted to learn more about how this project is funded and if we have pursued this mostly with ratepayer dollars or if it's coming out of any of the massive recent federal appropriations for things like site remediation, and also the extent to which local workforce development has been taken into consideration and is part of the plan.
So I'll start with the second question first, how's that? Local workforce development as far as what's been on site, we're turning that over to a contractor that's a specialty group to do that. I'll let Doug answer if he's hiring any local contractors to assist.
Number one, we're working with some local contractors on some of the scope, but like the main demolition will be our forces. Now, from that,
DBE participation?
there is not a DBE participation, but there is a hiring goal for local workforce. So we do have that, which is why we use some of the local subcontractors. We're also a union contractor. Demolition gets a little tricky with some of the specialty, but we do go to the halls, and we do that as soon as we come to town and solicit if there are any local contractors or local workers with demolition experience.
And as far as funding, we're obviously looking at the lowest cost option to the ratepayers, whether that's through internal resources and Investment Recovery Act or grants and those types of things. So those are things we're researching. I don't believe we've secured anything yet at this time, but those are things we will continue to look for just to help with the overall cost.
That's a little scary. There's a lot out there.
And yes,
Like right now, in remediate, rather it not be passed on to us if we can avoid it, especially at a time when the whole country's, spending the money that got poured into these initiatives and then.
Yeah, fair enough. And Travis, do you have any follow-up on that might provide more clarity?
Yeah, for the funding, a very good question. When it comes to grant funding, there is a lot of money out there right now. We're aggressively going after all of it. There's a lot of work right now, so some of this is getting the structure down. Some of that they put on the responsibility of utilities who's owned and operated to get that down. And some of the site remediation is also grant available that will also go with that for the long-term cleanup that Summer mentioned. So we are very aggressively trying to find everybody else's money to use before ours.
So I haven't forgotten what Texas looked like last winter and how much power we're getting from solar and wind. And this wasn't scheduled to happen until 2035. What's the hurry?
As far as Drake itself and tearing it down, is that the question?
And that was 2035.
Right, as part of the 2020 resource plan that we went through the process that got approved, was that Drake would come down sooner than 2035, and a lot of that had to do with the cost to maintain Drake through 2035 from a capital and O&M cost. It's an old plant, so it's very, very expensive, right? Not the best use of resources. So at the time we evaluated that versus putting in these new natural gas generators that replaces Drake generation. And is that a better investment for our long-term future and for ratepayers going forward? We also looked at what you brought up, renewables, solar and wind, and we know that the sun shines sometimes and the wind doesn't always blow, right? So that's the beauty of, so the Drake power plant, it takes 12 hours to start up, a lot of costs, a lot of water, and then you have to run it for so many days to make it worth the money to do that. You can't bring it up and down because technology just doesn't allow for it. These new units start up in about 10 minutes, and we can bring them on and off as needed to kind of chase the wind and the solar to make sure we're, again, providing the lowest rates versus just sinking money into an old plant. So that is our bridge technology and our backup capacity, I guess, for lack of a better term.
With all the clean coal generation that has been developed, it seems like there might be some cost.
Not at this site, just because of the technology and the age of it, it's really not a good fit for that. And again, as we go forward with carbon and all the initiatives that are coming out, those are things we'll have to look at maybe at other locations. But this site, again, just built in the time frame it was, not a good fit from a cost perspective.
Thank you. My question isn't so much about the demolition of Drake. It's more to do with the equipment there. For instance, the Newman scrubbers that everyone recalls cost, I believe, $130, $170 million. I asked utilities if there was any possibility of retrofitting them elsewhere or selling to a different utility, maybe recoup some of the money. Instead, I was told that they were just going to scrap them and they're no use, even though they were effective back then.
Yeah. The Newman technology was very effective. It was, of course, put in place due to mandates that we had to meet for our emission standards by a certain date and time. We have taken out what equipment we can use in other locations or been able to resell, but the vast majority of it, since it's serial number 1 of 1, unfortunately, they've shopped that out and there's not an interest in it. That's where the contract will be using that as part of the scrap value, as part of the contract, unfortunately.
From a maintenance point of view, when you start a project of this level, and I'm sure that your company has ran into this, once you get into the project, you find new things and you have to readjust. How will the public be notified if, for some reason, this goes beyond 2024 for any reason? Will the public be updated as the project progresses?
My answer would be yes. That is, if you guys request we come out here and do this every 6 months just to give you a status update, I'm willing to do that. And I think Travis would volunteer me to do that. So I'm really happy to do that and reach out to, again, our public affairs group, and we'll give you that information. But I think the more we can share the information, the better off we all are.
I appreciate that.
About saving things, since it's an old building, are there old bricks for savings?
we have some old light fixtures. There's a turbine from one of the original units that's out front, if you've gone by that. Someone sold me Brickle brick that says municipal utilities. We are pulling that all down and saving that, and working with either Pioneer Museum or talking about what we're going to do with that long term. I believe there's also discussion about the old Drake facade that's on the office. Can we save some of that, maybe integrate it into the substation wall down the road as kind of a memorial to Drake?
Yeah, and just the bricks, I was thinking.
Yeah.
From the, I don't know, maybe it takes more work to clean them up.
Yeah, and it's really only that front structure as you drive by. Everything behind that front wall is all new. So it's kind of like going to Disney World and it's all just pretty on the front. Behind it's not very magical.
What about the chimneys?
The chimneys will come down.
Are they built with bricks?
No, they're cement.
Oh, okay.
And the cement's going to be left on the side, it'll crush, and then left on the side. Is that what's going to happen?
I'm going to let Doug answer that.
Okay, Doug.
Yes.
Is the cement going to be crushed and used as filler and just left on the side?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. All right.
Then we'll cover that.
And then it gets covered with the topsoil and the seed.
We have one question at the top first.
Good evening. My name is Alan Bush. I'm with the Trails and Open Space Coalition. Travis, thank you to you and the team for hosting this meeting. The Pikes Peak Greenway runs right along the western boundary of the site, and that's our primary urban trail. And is there any anticipated impact to that trail, whether it would be just a day here, a day there, or any long-term closures that you see?
Short answer is no. The closest we get is the rail unloader, and even that is far enough away. There's a set of tracks between there and the bike path.
Thank you.
I haven't unfortunately been to a lot of meetings about this, and so I probably missed what is going to happen to the land after all this is done. 4 inches of topsoil doesn't seem like a lot to me. If you're going to have something in there, you're going to want to plant trees, are you going to want to do some sort of gardening of it?
And that'll go back to the long-term environmental testing and remediation plan that will be dictated to us from EPA and CDPHE of what that final closure will look like long-term. So right now, it's just to get the site in a stable site or in a stable location, and we'll put grass on it, and we'll follow up down the road with that environmental testing and remediation. So there'll be a phase 2 or a long-term plan.
So right now, there's no plan for what's going to happen after everything's done.
Yeah, right now that's very much up in the air to determine what that is, and it's really going to be dependent on how quickly we can assess that environmental issue and remediate that to make that safe for whatever that long-term plan is.
Okay, thank you.
In this area, there's a little bit of question about that 4 inches. Is that standard operating procedure, just 4 inches? Because we're here in Colorado, we know what the wind does. We know what erosion is like. And before that grass can even catch hold, I'm believing that we're gonna have some empty and open bits and pieces of concrete, crushed concrete with God only knows what in it, exposed before the grass catches hold. Unless you're gonna sod the whole thing,
I'm going to actually turn over to Brian Lynch. He came up a second ago from the environmental perspective. He is our on-site environmental person, so I'll let him answer.
Okay, don't try to throw my skirt up now.
No, never. Yeah, we know the wind blows pretty bad here, right? The intent is to leave the site with natural native grasses that doesn't take a lot of water to grow. And Independence, through a third-party contractor, I believe, will have someone maintaining that site for us for a while until all that grass does take off and grow. And we'll be watching that, maintaining that.
Okay.
And I think bigger picture also as far as the regulatory side of this, until you can have the site stabilized, you continue to have to manage a stormwater permit and a dust mitigation plan. So it's in our best interest to get that established as quickly as possible so we don't have to continue doing weekly and monthly inspections for a very long time.
Is there a plan on what types of grass seeds you're going to put down? Because the natives aren't going to germinate in late summer and fall.
We did have a specification. I honestly don't know what it is off the top of my head. I don't know if you do either. We can certainly get that specification and get it out to, somehow get it out through the corporate comms group and get it to you. So, but I honestly don't remember what it is in my head. I apologize.
I was just wondering, I know you mentioned that the environmental impact studies and the remediation aren't going to start until after everything is leveled. I was curious if you have a sense for the timeline around like when those studies will start, when sort of the stuff that has to happen before the actual stuff on the site will start for that process.
Yeah, it won't happen until the demolition is completely done so that we can assess the entire site as a whole to really truly get that picture of what that looks like. So in 2024, 2025.
And do you have a sense for how long that takes once it starts?
Brian's done this in the past, and I think it just depends on, again, what they tell us we have to sample for, how many sites, and it will really be dependent on CDPHE.
Thanks again, guys, for coming out and giving us. I'm Justin Lake from General Contractors. I was curious, are there any components in the scope that are unknown or maybe present a challenge, or is this pretty bread and butter for the team? Any contingent points or sticky points in the scope?
I wouldn't say bread and butter. We flashed the slide up. We've demolished 28 power plants across the country. But everyone, you know, it's demolition of a power plant. It's, you know, every day you're looking at hazards, you're keeping guys safe, you're watching the dust, you're watching the noise. So it's keeping your eye on the details, really. And quite frankly, most of it is safety and keeping our guys safe.
Thank you.
What's the traffic going to be like in front of the site during all this? Canals?
Truck traffic, approximately 8 loads a day. We won't shut the road down. No road shutdowns. I think there's some utility isolations that have to happen, but not for all purposes.
They shut off Sierra Madre between Cimarron and... They shut off Sierra Madre between Cimarron and Los Angeles when they were working on the construction of the stadium and the project building that's going on.
Okay.
And so I was just wondering if they're going to be shutting down the canals too, because the people that live in the neighborhood, that's kind of a main drag for them to get out of there. You know what I mean? That's that northbound.
All of our work is inside the fence.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yes.
Did you say 8 trucks or 80 trucks? 8 loads a day.
The question was if the 8 trucks run all together or certain hours.
Spread out over a full work day.
I live half a block from Sierra Madre.
Okay.
And I live on Los Angeles Street.
Okay.
I don't like noisy trucks.
Okay.
Let me make sure you're on Sierra Madre. Yeah, right here.
Right there.
Is that one? You have half a block out.
Okay, so you're back here.
Yeah.
So you're going to go right in front of the Salvation Army.
Yep, and on Sierra Madre, tie 25.
Does that help, ma'am?
Could you use the train rather than trucks?
I'm sorry?
Could you use a train instead of trucks?
It's a possibility, but sometimes the train traffic doesn't always correspond with getting the material out in time. We've done it on other projects, and quite frankly, we are talking to the railroad. Our primary focus right now, though, or our primary means is just to use the trucks.
Yes.
Where are the employees, the workers, where are they going to be parking? Are they going to be parking across on Conejos?
No, they'll be on site.
Yeah, but before when they were doing a lot of things, a lot of the parking was right across the street from the houses there on Conejos. And there's a lot of traffic going in, and apparently a lot of the workers have diesels. And so it makes a lot of noise when they're starting up.
And I think for the NGG project, they parked in a lot kind of down here. That makes sense where my pointer's at. They'll utilize the on-site parking in this area.
Yeah.
It's inside where the old employees of the power plant used to park.
Yeah.
A quick question about railroad trackage. Help me. I think the through trackage is on the east side of the property, right? Where the trains will continue to flow. But is there a loop of traffic or rails that go around the property to the west? I guess it would be for unloading or unloading cars. And if that's the case, that rail loop, does that disappear? Is that gone?
Right now we're waiting, so that rail goes around the backside of the property and stops where our trains used to stop. It doesn't go all the way through the property. Right now we're leaving that in place so that if it can be used during this process, and then we're also leaving in place just in case there's something in the future that might be used for, but that's still up in the air how long or if it'll be permanently left.
Okay, thank you.
On the subject of the rails, the South Downtown Rail Overpass project looks like it's going to be going on around the same time and maybe rerouting that railroad. What kind of collaboration is taking place between the city and the Colorado Springs utilities to coordinate that and make sure, say, Sierra Madre access isn't blocked or anything?
Christian, Patty, do you have information on that project and how it may impact this? You stumped me, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
I did. No, we have not had any collaboration with them yet, as it is a city project, but I will definitely look into that and make sure that we're collaborating with them.
All right. Any more last questions going once? Twice? If I had a gavel, I'd use it.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.